Hello, everybody. This is Georgianne Hughes, and this is the Byte Show. And this evening, we have decided to do some talking about the Alien Scourge. And we have been scourged with these little aliens for thousands of years, and they're still here. And a lot of people think many different things about these little aliens. And we're going to talk with Olaf Hage and see what happens here. This is sort of an impromptu conversation. Hello, what are you doing?
Oh, you're going to blame me for this, are you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. This is just...
I am not responsible for the Alien Scourge. I have to know you. I want to make it absolutely clear here. I have nothing to do with all these aliens that everybody got. It's not my fault that everybody thinks that we're being invaded by aliens from the planet Mongo or wherever they're supposedly coming from.
Yeah.
I didn't do this. I really didn't. I had nothing to do with it.
Well, isn't there something, even in the apocryphal text, where it says that, you know, God put them under the earth? And that was a long time ago.
Well, look, these beings that people are seeing, everybody says they're from, oh gosh, what is it, Beta Pictoris or Alpha Centauri or Zeta Reticuli,
Yeah.
Ziti Ravioli.
Ziti Ravioli, I love it.
It comes from all kinds of places.
Yeah.
Well, look, the problem with these things is that they have 2 arms, 2 legs, fingers on their heads, toes on their feet. You know, they got a forearm, an upper arm. They got elbows. They got shoulders. They got heads. They got 2 eyes. They got some sort of nose, some sort of thing. You know, they've got chins, maybe receded, but they got them. They got foreheads. They got necks. You know, they got funny bones. Well, maybe they don't have funny bones. They don't seem to have a sense of humor.
Yeah.
But they got just about everything else. And, you know, if it looks like a duck, it walks like a duck, it quacks like a duck, it's a duck. And if it looks like a human being and it walks like a human being, and by golly, it's got arms and legs and hands and so forth, I got a funny feeling it just might be one of us.
Good point.
Look, we have reports of these creatures having sex with human beings.
Yeah, right.
Which means their equipment must be, you know, relatively compatible. You know, it's mammalian equipment. We have reports that they produce some offspring one way or another here. In fact, we have men who were abducted supposedly by these aliens who had sex with female aliens and supposedly produce offspring. We know, therefore, that we're dealing with creatures that seem to be genetically compatible with us. So, look, compare this to chimpanzees. You can have sex with chimpanzees all day long. Well, maybe you can't, but here, come to think of it, I'm not sure if we can. I guess there's somebody out there who's tried it, but anyway. But you're not going to produce any offspring.
Right.
Nor are you with gorillas or orangutans or, you know, anything else out there that looks kind of like us. Although, think about this. Every alien that anybody's ever reported seeing looks more like us than a chimpanzee does.
True.
Okay? Or a gorilla, or an orangutan, or any of the other apes. So, you know, they're obviously much closer to us than those things are, and they're from here. Which is more alien to us? Say, you know, a little gray alien, one of these 4-foot-tall grays that you talk about with the big heads?
Yeah.
Or I don't know, a cockroach.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the cockroach looks a lot less like us than the little gray alien does.
True.
Nobody is accusing the cockroach of coming from Mars. Well, I don't think anybody is, anyway.
Okay.
You know, I mean, the fact is that the genetics of this are obviously implying that they are very close to us. you take a horse and you mate it with, I think it's a mule or a donkey. I forget how this works, but one or the other, and you get a donkey, and then it can't reproduce or something like that.
Right.
You know how that works? I don't know. I think it's I'm going to guess. Let's say it's a horse and a donkey, and the result is a mule, and the mule can't reproduce. The only way you get mules is by mating horses and donkeys, which, terrifies the donkey, no doubt, and it frustrates the horse. But nevertheless, it's a dead end. And, you wouldn't think so, but it is. Now, they breed lots of different kinds of dogs, but, you try mating a dog to a cat, see what happens. Well, see if you can keep the cat around long enough to get that to happen. There's limitations here. But, boy, we can mate with these aliens. Now, look, those are not aliens. Those are our kinfolk, okay? I mean, they've got to be related to us. They're not aliens. They're from here.
Well, they sure do want samples of DNA and stuff,
Well, yes. So they keep taking samples of us like it means something to them. Mean anything to them unless it, meant something to them. So, I mean, they look like us. They can mate with us. They breathe our air. Hey, think about that for a minute. There's argon in our atmosphere. Doesn't bother you, doesn't bother me, but it might very easily bother a creature from another world, but they're breathing it just like we are. They're on Earth gravity. Doesn't seem to bother them a whole lot. I'll tell you something. You try walking on Jupiter sometime. I mean, if it had a solid surface. I mean, the gravity of Jupiter would be enormous compared to the gravity of the Earth. Something like 300 times our gravity.
Right.
Lift your foot off the ground. Aliens don't seem to have any problem with our gravity. They're acclimatized to our atmospheric pressure. If you went to Mars right now, you ever see the movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger, Total Recall, where he steps outside for a moment and his eyes pretty much explode? Because the air pressure, the atmospheric pressure I should call it, on Mars is like 1/100th the pressure that you have here on the Earth. And as a consequence, your body, which is balanced in its pressure internally vis-a-vis the outward pressure of the atmosphere that's pressing in, well, if you go into a real low-pressure area, your body tends to expand. That's why people feel headaches and feel uncomfortable when a storm is coming, because it's a low-pressure area. So your blood tends to expand, and you get a headache, and your knees begin to hurt. And see the problem here?
Sure.
That's just a tiny difference in pressure here on the Earth. Imagine what would happen if you were an alien and you went to a planet that had a totally different atmospheric pressure than you were used to. You'd explode, or you'd get a really bad headache, and they wouldn't be having sex with us. That's a joke. Anyway.
Okay.
So the problem is that these guys are adapted to our atmosphere, to our gravity, to our air pressure, to our DNA. They look like us. They're us. They are somehow or other genetically connected to the human race. Now, the problem is the somehow or other part.
Yeah.
I mean, now that we've established they aren't aliens, then we have to figure out, well, where are they from? And what is it they want?
Good point. Yeah, what do they want?
Okay, now, well, they're from here, but I should have said, when are they from? Because we don't see them being produced right at the moment. So they're either from our past or our future. Now, if they were from our future, that means that there's such a thing as time travel, and somewhere down the road, after human beings have turned into apparently little gray vegetables or whatever they are, they'll come back to see how we're doing, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense, since they should do it, they should remember, right?
Right.
Okay. But if, let's say they're from our past, then somewhere in the past there could have been genetic experimentation. Any sign of that in the Bible? Well, let's see now. In Genesis 6, doesn't it say something about all flesh had corrupted itself across the face of the earth.
Yeah, well, Olaf, they were they were practicing bestiality, sex with animals, raping women, raping and sodomizing men and boys. I mean, these so-called fallen angels were pretty bad dudes.
Yeah, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to produce anything that looks like a little gray.
Yeah.
Or something that looks like a tall blonde Venusian or a reptilian, or, well, maybe the reptilians, I'm not sure about that. But, I mean, the genetics here require that somebody sit down, basically, and deliberately fiddle with the genes.
Right.
I don't think this is due to just having funny sex, okay?
Yeah.
Serious sex, for that matter. I think that this is about people who sat down in the laboratory, or maybe they were standing, but, or floating around on their tails or whatever they were doing. But they were in a lab. They were working on this scientifically. They were trying to create something, and they did. Now, I'm no big fan of Zecharia Sitchin, but he did write a book called The Cosmic Code, which talks about ancient genetic and DNA research, cloning in the ancient world and things of that sort. And he looked for things that referred to that kind of activity that might have been going on in past times thousands of years ago. Well, I believe that, in fact, he was on to something. I believe he was correct. There was some sort of genetic activity going on in the ancient world, and in terms of genetic research. Now, not only is the Bible in Genesis 6 alluding to it, but, and it says in reference to this passage that there were giants in the earth in those days.
Right.
And, the suggestion is that something was done to human genes in that context. But we've got reports of other activity that implies that there were things going on that required mixing of animal and human genetics.
Mm-hmm.
Chimera.
Yes.
Creatures that mix different animals together.
Right.
The ancients had a lot of pictures or images or sculptures where they showed multiple animals combined together. The winged lion or the winged leopard, the sphinxes, in other words.
Mm-hmm.
The chimeras, which had, I think, the head of an eagle and the body of a lion and the feet of a bear, or, that kind of thing. There's all different kinds of combinations. I mean, even in the book of Revelation, when they talk about the beast with the 7 heads, says that he's got, he's part leopard, part lion, part bear. You get the impression that this sort of thing was not just a symbol, that it may have had something to do with actual genetic manipulation in the past. Why is the Antichrist called a beast and described as having, if you will, some genetic material from a bear, a lion, and a leopard in him?
Mm-hmm.
Could it be literally that this guy has a combination of these genetic strains inside his physical makeup? Could somehow or other that genetic material have gotten into him? Let me give you a couple of thoughts on this. Did you ever see the movie where Arnold Schwarzenegger becomes he's a kind of a robot from the future, and he comes back to our time, and he's pursued by a metal robot from the future, Terminator,
Mm-hmm.
And this metal robot, he's made of liquid metal. Well, he's able to just touch a human being, and he can sample their DNA, including the DNA of their clothing or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and he can duplicate the whole thing so that he looks exactly like whatever it is that he samples. What if the reason that angels can appear like human beings and be entertained unawares, in other words, that people, without realizing it, have had angels that to them looked and felt like human beings around, because the angel can shapeshift into a human being. It can appear like a specific person.
Right.
In fact, we know that there are stories where somebody's daughter dies, and the mother thinks that her daughter comes home and says, "Hi, Mommy," and gives her a big hug and goes into her room, and 2 seconds later the phone rings, and she hears that her daughter has just died in an automobile accident. And she goes to her daughter, she says, "That's impossible, my daughter's in the bedroom," and he goes to the bedroom's empty. And it turns out that her daughter really did die. And says, "Who was that who showed up to give her a hug?"
Yeah.
And so there's this idea that angels can shapeshift or transform themselves into specific human beings. How do they do that? I believe that guardian angels, which the Bible talks about us having, are able to, if you will, because they hang around you all the time, they're able to sample your DNA. And after you die, they can sometimes go to comfort your loved ones with little scenes like the one I just described, which is, while not an actual event, is typical of the kind of things that people report. If that's true, and again, there's an if there, if that's true, then why can't we say that angels can sample not just other human beings, but animals? And if you look at the Bible, you see what appear to be angels who've done just that. That seem to be part lion and part eagle and so forth.
Right.
Cherubim. If an angel has sampled these other creatures and then has sex with a human woman, as it says in Genesis 6, isn't it possible that those offspring might contain, if you will, as part of that process, some of the DNA of the eagle and the lion and the bear and the ox and whatever else that angel had sampled? In other words, that the beast might literally contain in his genetic material some sort of DNA from these non-human animals.
Very interesting. Yeah.
So, if that's the case, then when we're talking about aliens here, for example, look at the little gray for a moment. In the ancient world, they have traditions about dolphins who go up to the summit of Mount Olympus to give the gods a message.
Right.
That's quite a jump.
Yeah.
That's way above water level. You know what I'm saying?
Sure is.
What's the dolphin doing climbing a mountain? How does he get up there? How does he deliver a message? Unless, of course, that little gray fish isn't a fish at all, that reference to the dolphin is actually a symbolic reference to little gray aliens. And therefore, that what the ancients are talking about, at least when they talk about these messenger dolphins, the ones that talk, the ones that act like they're really intelligent, not just smart enough to blow themselves up crashing into an enemy submarine, but are just really intelligent, who seem to have special, godlike qualities in the eyes of the ancients. Maybe these, in fact, are dolphin genetics mixed with human genetics. Why would you do that? Well, some of the research on little gray aliens and their craft seem to indicate that they are living in a fluid on those UFOs. Okay? Now, we're making this on June 24th, which is the anniversary of the Kenneth Arnold sighting of the flying saucers, when they first used the term flying saucer on June 24th of 1947. Well, think about this. Those craft were making right-angle turns and doing things that if there was a human being inside it, forget the technology of how you make the craft do that. How do you make the human being do that without turning into a pile of rubble inside the craft?
Yeah, good point.
You can't do that unless, of course, you cushion it by putting the person in a different form where they can withstand those G-forces. And it has been speculated that one way to do this is to transform the human being into a fish-like person. I believe that my memory is correct here. The movie The Abyss,
Yeah.
showed a human being, who was given a fluid that contains oxygen, and he was able to dive to impressive depths in the sea because he basically was turned into a fish. His lungs were filled with a fluid. It allowed him to dive to extreme depths without getting the bends because they put this special fluid inside him. In other words, he became more fish-like.
Yeah.
Okay? Why wouldn't the ancients, if they had a need to do it, they had a craft that had extreme maneuverability, why wouldn't they think of genetically modifying babies so that they would turn into, or somehow or other be merged with, cloned into, special dolphin-like pilots who were part human and part dolphin?
Very interesting.
Okay. I think the little grays are, in fact, dolphins. I think the word was used to describe them because they were literally part dolphin. And some of the craft descriptions that we've heard about indicate that they were filled with fluid. There are indications of things about them that look very much like they might have had some kind of underwater capability.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
well, Olaf, also, people that have been approached by these little grays have said that they had this gray, this grayish-looking skin. The description reminds me of a dolphin's skin.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Of course, we also have the reptilians.
Yeah.
One of the interesting things about reptilians, of course, is that reptiles or amphibians are believed to emerge from the sea. And maybe some of the characteristics of reptiles were used for some other reason. Maybe they had a particular kind of craft. Reptiles are really happy when it gets really hot.
Yeah.
Okay? Well, they may be immune to certain kinds of radiation. Supposedly our planet's been exposed to a certain amount of radiation over the eons, and yet some of the most primitive animals on our planet today are the reptilians. The reptilian, I'm not talking about aliens here, I'm talking about, snakes and things.
Yeah.
And what I'm wondering is, well, maybe that's because they can survive high radiation levels. So again, if you wanted to send human beings who have been modified through heavy areas of radiation to explore certain kinds of planets that we know in our solar system, like Jupiter, for example,
mm-hmm.
you wanted to dive down into Jupiter, you'd have to be able to withstand a lot of radiation. If you wanted to go to certain places in our solar system, get too close to the sun, for example, go to Mercury or Venus or whatever, you might need very specialized versions of humanity. So I suspect that somebody in the ancient world was trying to modify human beings for the purpose of overcoming the limitations that human beings have for various kinds of space travel.
Wow, very interesting. My goodness. Well, there's been people talk about the fact that they believe there's cities on the moon and things of that nature. So, and people also in the past have talked about the possibility of cities on Mars.
Yeah, and I don't know about the cities on the moon. I'm a little suspicious of that data because I don't see anything there that looks more than like an anomalous geological feature at the moment. I mean, you can explain that stuff away, I think. But the stuff on Mars is a lot harder to explain.
Yeah.
And I know we've only got 5 minutes to go before we take our break at the bottom of the hour here. Flip my tape and do other things.
Yeah.
I do think that it's important to point out that Mars is a planet that we are now beginning to look beneath the surface of. They've got this ground-penetrating radar that they're orbiting overhead with this satellite. They're going to be able to see, several miles down into the Martian surface.
Mm-hmm.
I understand correctly. Have they done that to us? Have they done that to the Earth?
Huh.
Are there satellites overhead that are penetrating us? See right through our houses, through our roofs, through our basements, through our whatever? There was an episode of JAG, G-A-A-G, one of my favorite shows, now canceled on CBS, used to be on Friday nights.
Yeah.
And JAG, it's in reruns on USA Network, I think, and other places. They had an episode where they showed the Aurora, this super secret plane that's not supposed to exist, which now some people say is already obsolete, been replaced by, rectangles. And this plane was sent on a mission to North Korea.
Mm-hmm.
And the mission was that they were supposed to look below the ground from their plane flying overhead at thousands of miles an hour. They were supposed to look below the ground in North Korea to see what tunnels they had dug and how many people were in the tunnels and what kind of weapons and supplies they had. Really?
Okay.
Now, this show, JAG, is not a fictional show. It uses Navy equipment, aircraft carriers, destroyers, courtrooms, you name it. I mean, it's shot on location, which saved them a lot of money in their budgets. So that when you see the show, you've got to remember something. The Department of the Navy is cooperating with them. So when they talk about stuff like this, I assume it means it's true. So they've probably looked below the ground of this planet. And I suspect that they must have found stuff underneath of our planet.
Well, that's a good cliffhanger.
Buried city.
Yeah, let's hold it there, and we'll be right back, folks. Okay, folks, we are back, and Olaf is ready. We're talking about aliens and strange things going on. Olaf.
What's underneath the earth?
Yeah. What do you... people have said, for example, in South America, that there are entrances to huge underground cities and tunnels that run all over the world, under the earth. Is that possible?
I think so. For one thing, we are beginning to realize that the technological level of people on this planet in ancient times, I mean really ancient times, not those lazy Sumerians who hardly did anything but grow maize.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about the people long before Sumer.
Yeah.
The people back in the period which we now call the Ice Age.
See, this is something that aggravates me. So many of these so-called researchers that are out there selling books are trying to sell people. They make it sound as if the Sumerian writings are the oldest writings around.
They're pretty recent, actually.
Yeah, they are. And, they don't want to talk about the ancient Hebrew writings. They don't want to talk about anything that would...
upset the apple cart.
Yeah, exactly. And we're not talking about ivory tower people. We're talking about people that are free to write whatever they want to write, and they still stick to this Sumer is the oldest thing there. No, it's not.
Yeah, this idea that history begins at Sumer is an outmoded scholarly delusion
right.
found about 50 years ago. And a guy wrote a book by that title, History Begins at Sumer. We now can pretty much say that hardly anything began at Sumer.
Yeah.
I mean, everything that this guy said that Sumer had first, we've now found in some earlier culture.
Yeah.
So, Sumer didn't invent hardly anything, if anything. And it was really a backwater civilization that arose in the Mesopotamian Valley about, 5,500 years ago. And it is a remnant of a culture of some nomads who had migrated from the Black Sea area from a couple thousand years earlier. They gradually worked their way south from the Black Sea over a period of 2,000 years. That shows you how slow their culture and how low their technology was.
Yeah.
Long to get over that mountain range. But those people, the Umayyad culture, as it's sometimes called, they are really a primitive group of people, and their culture shows it. Whereas you could go back before them, and you could see evidence of everything that the Sumerians had, and a lot of other stuff besides, and indications of flying machines, of all kinds of strange craft, even possibly of nuclear weapons and other things in use before Sumer. Sumer is a recent event, it's within the last 6,000 years. But if you go back 12,000, 18, 24,000, then you're looking at some cultures that were in many ways vastly more advanced even than we are. But not, I don't think in moral or ethical terms. I think they simply were more advanced in terms of certain kinds of technology that they seem to have. In some respects, their technologies were not as advanced as ours. I'm not sure that their use of, I don't think they had much use for plastics, We were the ones who came up with something that wouldn't decay in the earth for millions of years.
Yeah. Oh, gee.
Yeah, we came up with that idea. But they came up with materials that were very hard and very specialized for particular uses. And I would not be at all surprised for us to discover that one of those Ice Age cultures, or which I call pre-flood cultures, it wouldn't be surprising at all if one of them turned out to have, or several of them turned out to have space travel, and what we now call UFOs. And that, in fact, this technology, which Alexander the Great saw, and a lot of other people down through the ages had to deal with, that this technology was, in fact, developed some 15, 18,000 years ago, and has been in use essentially nonstop ever since. But the function of that technology, why they used it, what they used it for, where they went with it, and so forth, those are other issues. And in looking into that, we have to address the question of the Torah. If you look at the first 5 books of the Bible, what are called the Torah, the Law of Moses, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy.
Right.
What you find there are all kinds of little rules about what you can do to an animal before you eat it, which animals you're allowed to eat, how close you can get to an animal, what you can touch, what you can't touch, who you can touch, and when you can touch them, when you get contaminated, and so forth. I mean, these are rules about people picking up some sort of biochemical contamination from other living things. That's what these rules are all about. They are designed, I believe, to protect the Israelites from hormones. If you look very carefully, for example, it says, a man's not supposed to have sex with his wife during her period. Why? Well, for one thing, the menstrual flow is full of hormones. You are not supposed to eat any animal that dies violently. Why not? Because its tissues and its blood are full of hormones.
Well, look at these doctors pumping these women full of hormones and all the resulting health problems.
Yeah, and there are artificial hormones. We see the birth defects, we see the cancers, we see all stuff, you know.
Well, and look at the drug Premarin. Play with that word. Glenn Parnham, the other day, when I was talking with him, he said, just look at the word mare urine.
Oh, it's made from horse's urine?
Yeah.
Oh, how about that?
And women take this stuff, you know.
Well, only doctors could convince, only a man in a white coat could convince a woman to inject or swallow horse urine.
Yeah.
Women will do anything for a man in a white coat.
And some of these guys in the white coats are laughing all the way to the bank.
Exactly. or to the cancer surgical operating room where they then treat the problem they just created down the other room.
Yeah.
I mean, the sad part here is that we got warned 3,500 years ago in the Torah to watch out for this kind of stuff. And now everybody's laughing at those books of the Bible. We think that they're no longer relevant. Why, they're more relevant than ever.
Oh, absolutely.
Just don't seem to get it here. We are seeing the results of violating those laws. Where do you think mad cow disease comes from? You can't have mad cow disease if you follow the Torah.
That's right.
It's impossible.
But you see the bottom line, it's all about money, and in the process, the animals are abused and treated horribly, fed literal garbage.
Oh, yeah, they're fed each other's waste.
Yeah, and so how do you expect to have a healthy animal? It's not possible.
And, of course, what do you think a hot dog is?
Oh, God. Did you know that if you feed a young child 3 hot dogs a week, they have come up with some studies now that prove that the child will get a form of leukemia?
Leukemia?
Yes.
From eating 3 hot dogs a week?
Yes.
I guess I wasn't young enough. Okay, never mind.
Okay.
The stuff they are now putting in the hot dogs must be horrible. My mother's father was a butcher, but he was a different kind of butcher. He put the best cuts of meat into his wieners and his sausage. Okay, he didn't put the what do we call it? The squeal.
Well, it isn't even to do with the quote unquote best cuts of meat. It has to do with the way the animal was treated from birth to death, how it was fed.
Yeah, that has a lot to do with it. I mean,
that has everything to do with it, Olaf.
We're feeding animals, other animals. In fact, we're feeding them their own species.
Yeah.
Of course, that's where mad cow disease comes from, a lot of other things. We don't know the exact cause of Alzheimer's. I mean, we suspect a bunch of things like aluminum and stuff like that. But my goodness, we've got so many diseases that didn't exist 100 years ago before we adopted certain kinds of agricultural and food processing practices. You've got to know that what we're doing has some connection with all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And, there are a lot of hormones or hormone-active drugs that are being given to people to control depression, all of these Prozac and other mind-altering drugs that we're passing out. Well, after they take the drugs, those drugs end up in our rivers. Well, the rivers from which cities downstream draw their water supply.
Right.
Which means that millions of people in our country are being involuntarily given Prozac and every other drug under the sun, Viagra and all kinds of stuff that says, do not take this if you are a pregnant or lactating woman. Well, that's what the label says. But that's not what your sewer processor is doing, because that guy is letting that stuff go into the river. And that stuff is flowing downstream and combining with God knows what else might be in that river, and then being, going through the intake valve into the water supply of some other city where pregnant women are drinking the water. So we're seeing kids who are born with all kinds of strange afflictions. And it's not surprising at all to me. And, of course, people say, well, this has got nothing to do with the aliens. Really? God said, don't do this sort of thing. Be careful how you handle your animals. Do not contaminate yourself with hormones. Be careful about that.
Yeah.
Things are powerful chemicals, okay? I was very careful about this stuff. And he was trying to make us aware of how easily we could pollute ourselves with things like this and the diseases that would result. That's what it's all about. That's what the Torah is about. That's what God is warning us about.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And so we ignore those warnings. Okay? Why? Why are we ignoring those warnings? Now people say, oh, it's to make money because of profit. Yeah, but did you know that the beginning of organic chemistry was the benzene ring? That the discovery of that was due to a dream, an inspiration that somebody had? Do you know how many of our modern inventions and ideas and so-called scientific progress are a direct result of direct, if you will, psychic messages from beyond that various people, including Thomas Edison, claim to have received?
Mm.
These people actually would say, well, I didn't really invent this, I didn't discover this, I dreamed it. Or somebody told me this in a dream, or I had a vision, or some angel appeared to me. You'd be surprised how many of our inventions, so much of modern scientific high-tech civilization rests upon visions and dreams and things that go bump in the night, if you will.
Yeah.
The aliens have given us a lot of this. And, you know, that's not anything new. You go back to the book of Enoch, you go back really even to the book of Genesis, if you read carefully what it's saying in Genesis 6 there. But you can see in a lot of ancient Jewish writings and early Christian writings where they talk about the fact that it was the fallen angels that gave these technologies to human beings. That human beings didn't invent them, that they were given to them. Now, I'm not saying people can't invent stuff. I'm saying that the bad stuff, some of the stuff that's really hurting us, came from bad angels. And those, if you will, aliens, gave us ideas to do things that we shouldn't have done. You know, we've got evidence, for example, over in India, of ancient nuclear wars that were fought.
Yes.
Really. The story goes that there's actually a Hebrew text in ancient writing that says that Satan, after he was cast out of the Garden of Eden, you know where he was cast to? India.
How do we know that?
Well, that's what the text says. Yeah.
Okay.
India was a bigger place than India is today, and it stretched a lot further to the east and the west than where modern India does. Even as recently as 1947, it did. You know, it covered Bangladesh and Pakistan in those days. What is now Bangladesh and Pakistan. So India's been shrinking down through the centuries. But according to the ancient writings, this is where Satan was cast. And then we see after that, we see that they developed some sort of nuclear technology, and they fought a nuclear war, apparently. Where did they get the idea to do that? According to the ancients, these technologies came from the angels. If you look at Egypt, for example, it says that Isis went to Thoth. Sometimes, in the Hebrew version of the story, this is the angel Raphael. Okay. Sometimes he's called a god, sometimes he's called an angel, but he's really the same thing. The Thoth is an angel, he's a god. The idea here is the same. And he gives Isis all sorts of biogenetic technology, how to create offspring, how to revive Osiris, how to have children when you don't have a living mate, how to clone offspring, in other words.
Right.
And it is from Isis that you can see in Egypt. You can see the flow of technology along these lines coming down into the ancient world. I think that they were messing around with breeding and DNA, interbreeding and cloning and stuff in this period before the flood in some of these pre-civilizations, that is to say pre-Sumerian civilizations. I think they were messing around with these technologies and creating dolphin men, reptile men, the beings that we think of as aliens. And I think it was part of this process where they were trying to solve certain problems, technological problems, and they were getting help from these fallen angels, angels who had messed with human beings in ways that they were not supposed to be doing. And that's where we get this scourge of alien technology and our genetics and nuclear and all of this other stuff. In fact, how many times have you heard of back-engineered technology? In fact, we were mentioning the Aurora earlier, that super plane that could fly over the world in 20 minutes or something, or the black triangles, which act just like UFOs and so forth, that have replaced them. If this is back-engineered technology, back-engineered from the aliens, then what we're looking at, again, is another example of so many of where these fallen angels ultimately have given us technologies we wouldn't have had. Now, the other day they were saying that the guy who invented the semiconductor had died. But Philip Corso, who worked for the government in top-secret programs to take alien technology and to sneak it into the industrial complex, military-industrial complex, so that it could be used in the private sector, he said that the integrated circuit came from a crashed UFO, that we found this in one of these flying saucers, the type of thing that Kenneth Arnold saw on this date 58 years ago. I think that it's entirely possible that our entire computer revolution is based upon alien technology, that most of the advanced stealth bomber technology and a lot of the Aurora, the black triangles or whatever it is we're flying around, that this stuff comes from alien technology, which is to say fallen angel technology.
Right.
That these are things that they told us. And that's not to say that, as I said before, that human beings can't invent things. And we invent all kinds of stuff. But when we take these quantum leaps, when we go way beyond the level of invention that we have before us, and we leap, across time and space, literally, to technologies that, you couldn't even have conceived of a generation ago, those are technological leaps that I think get help from beyond. Not from other worlds, but from other beings, from other dimensions. I know people want to believe that there are other creatures like us out there. But as I've tried to explain already, it's really difficult. You would have to have a world that had our atmospheric pressure, our atmospheric mix with just the right measure of oxygen and nitrogen and argon and carbon dioxide and all the rest of it, the temperature range that we have. Oh, I didn't even get into their immunity to our bacteria, our viruses, our fungi, our mosquitoes. You really think that the aliens can avoid our mosquitoes? They land in all of these backwoods places and all these places that are infested with mosquitoes and they never get bit and never get any diseases? How is that? I mean, clearly they're adapted to the Earth. But if you had beings in another world, they would be adapted to their world, not to our world. They would have a different gravity, different atmospheric pressure, different kinds of microorganisms and infectious organisms. They would have different temperatures, different climate, different food, different everything. And they just simply wouldn't look like these creatures look. Which means that until we get invaded by something really alien, that's uncomfortable being here, chances are we haven't been yet invaded by aliens. Now that raises a question as to whether there really are any aliens out there. My argument is this. Every star has a zone of life around it. That is to say, a certain distance that you get from the star where it's warm enough for water to be liquid and for organic chemicals to combine. And that particular distance around some stars is too close to the star. It's within the radiation limits of the star, with the result that any life that got created would immediately be cooked by the radiation of the star, because the star is not hot enough to push the zone of life, if you will, out of its close-in radiation. So you would have to get a star that was big enough and hot enough, like ours is, to push the zone of life out away from the near area neighborhood of the star, which is a dangerous place to be, okay? So not all stars can have a zone of life that's actually viable. The zone of life is very narrow. It's usually only about one or at most two planetary orbits wide. In other words, only probably on average, typically one planet orbiting a star could possibly harbor life at any given time. But that's a key. The zone of life moves. It moves outward and away from the star because stars get hotter and hotter as they age. And because stars get hotter, the period during which life can evolve is actually very limited. It's only about a 2 billion year period at most that you can have the zone of life moving over a given planet. Okay? We've already passed the halfway point of the zone of life moving over the Earth's orbit. But there's another problem. We're in a circular orbit. Not all the planets in our solar system are in circular orbits. Venus is, the Earth is, we're almost circular, not quite, you know. There's a little ellipticity to all of the orbits. But to look at Mercury, for example, it has a pretty elliptical orbit. So does Saturn, if you take a good look at it. So does Pluto. So a lot of the planets in our solar system have orbits that don't remain at an even distance from the Sun. And that's even more true, we now discover, looking at other nearby planets in our galaxy. They have very elliptical orbits. And often you've got a really big planet in an elliptical orbit that comes really close within the zone of life and then goes out past the zone of life. You know what we call those? Vacuum cleaners.
Oh, my goodness.
Because they just vacuum up every little planet that might be in the zone of life, and basically they vacuum up life and destroy it. You just can't have life in those planetary systems. They have determined that almost all the star systems that we have seen are star systems with planets now. The ones with planets that we've discovered, something like 150 or whatever, almost all of them. It is impossible for there to be life in those solar systems because of the nature of the orbits of the planets that are orbiting those stars. They are vacuum cleaner planets. They make life around those star systems just simply impossible. They would collide with and clear away the zone of life path. So the zone of life is a hard thing to come by, and it's only briefly there. And it has to be at around a star that's not got too much radiation. It has to be the right kind of star. And then, too, you've got to have a planet of the right size. You've got to have water or some of the ingredients for life on it. And you've got to have higher elements in order to have a complex life form like we have. All those little trace elements like vanadium and things that we have that we need to live.
Yeah.
Well, next time you're worried about your manganese and your vanadium, remember this. They are created in supernovas. So unless you have enough supernovas in your vicinity to salt your planet with enough of these trace elements, you're not going to have these trace elements that are needed to perform these higher functions involving vision and brain activity and so forth. So where do you get the supernovas from? Well, you've got to get close into a galaxy to get supernovas. But the closer you get to the galaxy's core, the more supernovas there are, the more those supernovas blast away any life that does appear on any planets. And the radiation from the central core of the galaxy is so strong that it literally boils away the life that might emerge in any planet around any star. So there's only a narrow band of life, like a ring of Saturn, around any given galaxy. And in fact, a lot of galaxies are so radioactive that there's no zone of life. So you have to have a galaxy where you can have a zone of life. Luckily, we're in one of those. And then you have to, and it's a very narrow band, you have to be a star in that band. You have to have no vacuum cleaner planets. You have to have an Earth-like planet. You have to have a star that's hot enough to have a zone of life, and that Earth-like planet has to be in that zone of life. And now gets the hard part. You've got to stir up the mixing bowl. Because once you heat up that planet, if you've got all of those extra elements in it, okay, just enough supernovas but not too many in the area, you have to have that survive without a killer asteroid event and so forth. And you've got to have something to stir up those elements, which is to say, something like a moon. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
But our moon is the result of a fluke event where a planet the size of Mars collided with the Earth 4 billion years ago. Collide with us too late, and the zone of life has already passed us by. Collide with us right at the beginning of the zone of life period, and the Earth is just a molten mass during the zone of life phase. So no life is produced. You've got to collide early on in the process. And then you have to produce a moon that doesn't escape the gravity, but remains captive to the host planet. And it's got to be of the right size. We are a fluke. We are an aberrant event. And therefore, it is very unlikely for something even remotely like us to appear anywhere, certainly in our vicinity, in this galaxy. Maybe on another galaxy far, far away, but very unlikely to occur here. And again, I return to what I started with. These beings that people are reporting, maybe some of it's fanciful, some people are just nuts, who knows. But to the extent that they're reporting real creatures, they are not from some other world. They may have visited some other world, but they started out here. This is our DNA they're moving around with. This is human DNA, maybe mixed with dolphins, maybe mixed with reptiles, but basically, we have met the enemy, and they are us.
Oh, boy. Wow. Well, Olaf, my goodness. I keep getting this impression that all this has to do, because these aliens or whatever people want to call them, they appear and they disappear.
There's an interdimensional quality.
Yeah. And
a lot of this, that's why I say this is angelic technology. A lot of the things they do involve appearing and disappearing in and out of this dimension, psychic communications with people, all kinds of things that involve what are basically spiritual or interdimensional activity. Very much along the lines of what we expect of angels, as opposed to what we expect of physical beings in the material realm.
Mm-hmm.
The kinds of technologies that the angels know best are interdimensional technologies, and that's why you see these supposed aliens, that is to say, these human cloned creatures from the past. That's why you see them behaving the way they behave. I believe that, once again, when you trace this story back to its origins, it goes back to what are called angels. Now, I don't think an angel is a little ghosty that you stick your hand through. I believe that an angel is a physical, solid being from a higher dimension.
Right, I do too.
You go up to a higher dimension, those things are more real, more solid, more physically resistant, if you will, than we are. We're the ghosties. We're the little things that they can put their hands through. Okay? We're the dimensional beings. And in fact, there are lots of reports of things walking through people. They report that kind of phenomena.
Right.
We mistake what we're observing. If it's coming from a higher dimension, it's more solid than we are, not less. We're simply interfacing with it in a two-dimensional or a one-dimensional way. That is, we're only seeing a part of its reality. It's solid. It's not non-existent or like a ghost, When Jesus appeared in the upper room in Luke 24, and they supposed that they had seen a ghost, and he says, I'm not a ghost. Okay? But remember, he had also told them that in the resurrection, they would be like the angels. And he says, here, take hold of me. I see that I have flesh and blood. Flesh and bone, he said, actually. Solid stuff. In other words, we held him. We handled him, Peter said. Thomas comes and he puts his hand in the wounds, okay? He was a solid being, okay? He ate and drank with them, it says, in the resurrection, okay? Then he disappeared in their midst. He appeared in their midst and disappeared in their midst. That's an interdimensional being, a higher interdimensional being, more solid, more real in a dimensional sense than we are.
Well, see, that brings us right back to the same thing I've said before, Olaf. That's why Christianity and the name Jesus Christ is so hated by these these people who don't belong to God. There is so much power in that name. This system that we live in, or we think we live in, is set up a certain way. And there are mysteries about it. And the only way that you're going to get out of it without being soul scalped, as Zeph Daniel would say, is faith in Jesus Christ. That is the only way.
People who report being abducted, uttering the name Jesus, and being immediately returned.
Yeah.
And it's very powerful. I mean, there's no question about it. These beings are afraid of that name. They are aware of who he is. They respond to the power and the authority of the name. And in fact, there is some evidence to show that those who are abducted, generally speaking, do not have strong religious faith, certainly in Jesus. And that the ones who are abducted are those who essentially either have a weak faith or no faith at all.
It would be interesting to know also if there's any genetic markers in common with a lot of these people, you know?
There seem to be some variations in the genetics, although people of all kinds are abducted. The bias could be simply due to religious differences and maybe not to genetic differences. But that's an interesting question. Some people have looked into that, but you'd have to get an expert in that area and ask them that question.
Wow. Give out your website, Olaf.
Yes, the website is TheTimeQuest.com. That's all one word, TheTimeQuest, just like it sounds, TheTimeQuest.com.
And you also have a very interesting newsletter that you...
Well, it's an email letter for those who... You go to the website, you can email me and ask about getting on the newsletter.
Okay. Well, God bless you for coming on tonight, Olaf, and all our listeners out there, all 2 or 3 of them. You know, special blessings to everybody. Get right with the Lord and do it real soon, because a lot of interesting things are going to be happening. Thank you again, Olaf.
Thank you. God bless you.
Thanks. Good night, everybody. We'll be back.